All right, well, writing proofs. At one time, doing proof statements was a major part of what geometry was all about. In fact, Euclid's Elements, which is the whole basis of the geometry that we're studying, is nothing but proof statements. Or I say nothing but loaded. I mean, really loaded with proof statements. And we can have paragraph proofs and two-column proofs and flowchart proofs. There's different types of proofs, but what do we mean by writing a proof? So a proof statement is a logical argument in which each statement you make is supported by a statement that is known to be true. In other words, we may have statements and we have reasons. And here in this example, we're asked to write a paragraph proof. Now, when we have a proof statement, we're going to have a given, and then we're going to be asked to prove something. So let's see what we start off with. Given, here's our given, that C is between A and B. These are points. Point C is between point A and point B. And segment AC is congruent with segment CB. Write a paragraph proof to show, and here's what we're trying to prove, that C is the midpoint of segment AB. So C is between A and B such that segment AC is congruent to CB, and write a proof statement that shows C is the midpoint of segment AB. Now, we have to break this down into its elements. And we always start off a proof statement, or I say always, most always, by stating the given. So if C, and notice what we did, if C, we're putting this in a conditional statement, if C is between points A and B, and you can see that's what's given that C is between points A and B, and then here's a reason here, then by the definition of betweenness, A, B, and C are collinear, and AC plus CB equals AB. So in other words, if C is between A and B, then the segments, then AC to CB is going to equal AB. Now, if, again, here's a second statement, if segment AC is congruent to CB, and notice how that's another part of the given, that's the and out here, by the definition of congruence, they have the same measure, which means that AC is equal to CB. So, here's a tip here on proof statements. Anytime you go from a congruency statement to an equality statement, or vice versa, if you're going from an equality statement to a statement of congruence, then the reason is going to be the definition of congruence. And sometimes you may see it as the definition of congruent angles. Here we could say this is the definition of congruent segments. But anytime you go from a congruency statement to an equality statement, you can always rely on that definition of congruence to be your reason. So let's see what else we have. From the definition of a midpoint segment, if, here he gives a conditional, if C is between points A and B, then AC is equal to CB. So from the definition, we got a definition here. We got a fact. This is all about deductive reasoning. Look at what we have here too. Let's go back up and see what we have. We're using deductive reasoning to prove a conjecture. Here we said something about definition. Here we talk about definition. Here we talk about definition. We're using these statements of fact to prove what our conjecture is from the definition of a midpoint of a segment. So if something is the midpoint, then in this case, if C is between points A and B, then AC equals CB. Then, and look where we ended up. What were we setting out to prove? That C is the midpoint of segment AB. Then C is the midpoint of segment AB. And so this gives you some of the elements of doing a proof statement in paragraph form. I personally prefer the 2-column proof where we got on the left side statements and the right side reasons. But there's different ways to issue proof statements, and this is one of those ways, which is a paragraph proof. Students love proofs. We all love proofs. Not really. But proofs, definitely, you're going to exercise being persistent. You got to exercise. You got to have practice. You definitely got to have patience because you're trying to break things down into its various elementary parts. And you got to be persistent. It's all about math. And it's all about the characteristics, character traits that'll make you a special and successful mathematician.